Zoo workers of Reddit, which animal is the biggest jerk in your facility? Ex-zookeeper here. Orangutans are super smart, super strong, and super jerks. Well, some are. We had a female who, if you were standing in front of her indoor enclosure, would spit and hit you in the mouth every damn time. And grin. She grinned so big when it happened. Lesson learned. I heard about one who fashioned a key from a piece of wire and would pick the lock on her cage and go scampering merrily about the place. They could never figure out where she kept the key. Till they put a bunch of cameras on her. She would put it in her mouth when the keepers came around. When I worked as a zookeeper intern, I think the biggest jerks were the emus. It was the summer of 2004 and the emus shared an exhibit with the wallabies. The exhibit wasn't high security. It was essentially a fence made of dried bamboo stalks. Wallabies are super cute, and while we didn't have an area where they are in the same space as visitors, some zoos do. Wallabies are not typically threatening in any way. The emus were big jerks. They constantly pecked at the wallabies and were generally a pain. But they weren't separated because they didn't cause actual injuries. The wallabies eventually got their revenge and freedom. One night, one of the emus ran into the fence and sort of gently impaled itself. It wasn't badly injured, but it did fall down after the injury. What did the wallabies do? They kicked it in the head until it was dead. The wallabies and emus were separated the next day. Side note: zebras are jerks. 2. Our zebras shared an exhibit with the giraffes. We had a giraffe platform where visitors could feed the giraffes carrots, grain, and other goodies, according to the giraffe diet. Of course, the zebras wanted the goodies and would kick the giraffes so the giraffes would drop their food. Then the zebras would eat it. I wasn't there at the time that this has happened, but I used to volunteer at the Omaha Zoo. And there was the story of Fu Manchu, the orangutan. Apparently, one of the keepers found Fu and some of his buddies hanging out outside of their enclosure and ushered them back in. When it happened again, the keeper thought someone was leaving the enclosure open. It happened so much that someone was about to get fired over it. Finally, someone witnessed Fu climbing through an air vent to get to the door, pulling it open enough to expose a gap, then pulling a piece of wire from his mouth and using the wire to undo the latch and open the door. He'd been hiding the wire in between his gums and lips to engineer his escape. Only a big dick move because he almost got people fired. Otherwise, it was slick as hell. Edit: I accidentally a word. Not a facility I work at currently, but we had a kookaburra who would catch lizards, snakes, frogs, and even earthworms so he could feed them to you. You would be standing around doing your job and all of a sudden he shows up on your shoulder trying to force feed you a lizard he whacked on the ground 30 times. Oh, by the way, if you covered your mouth, why not try the ear? The ear is a great place to put a dead lizard or live earthworm. Right now it's the short-tailed leaf-nosed fruit bat. I'm an intern in a well-known zoo. We have a wet cave filled with probably 1,000 of these duckers. The door is surrounded by a wire cage. When we go to feed them, we just let the door open and let the bats fly in the cage. When we leave, we have to herd them into the cave. As an intern, I'm not allowed to touch them, so I put my hand up by them to guide them. Except they don't like that and they'll fly right in my face and hover there for a few minutes. One day I was by myself doing it and one of the little duckers would not get in the damn cave. I stood there for like 10 minutes doing jazz fingers and he just hung there. As whole. Aldabra tortoises. They have an outdoor pen, but obviously they are stuck in a smaller indoor enclosure during the colder months. They won't leave you the duck alone. I was watering the plants at one point when two big males came up behind me and pinned me to the wall. I pinwheeled my arms and fell onto one's back, sort of got to ride him. Other times, they decide to sit right in front of the door. So you're stuck until you convince them to move. You certainly aren't going to move 500 pounds of turtle on your own. If you put a squeegee against the wall, they simply have to knock it over and sit on it. Got the hose out? Yup. Gotta sit on it. Bringing out food? Sit right in the ducking feed troughs. The geese are pure evil. Once saw a goose at the zoo taunting some bird in an enclosure. He was all honk honk. Haha asshole, you can't do shit in there. I'm free to eat dropped hot dogs and scare toddlers, but you're stuck in there. I saw the aftermath of a goose that got in a Komodo dragon exhibit and apparently thought it could take the residents on. The zookeeper was mildly amused when she explained why the exhibit was closed for cleaning and mentioned geese are big digs, so it deserved it. I used to volunteer at a zoo and the biggest jerks were the ravens. They were really smart and awesome for enrichment activities and for teaching's classrooms, but if they got bored they would find a way to entertain themselves. One particular time a raven decided to place some of its food right outside its caged enclosure to lure a peacock. Once the peacock got close and started to eat, the raven would sneak up and pluck the tail feathers off of the peacock. Not a zookeeper. But our zoo has a cassowary named Sir Winston Churchill and his lady, the female mate. Apparently he is quite the escape artist. They had to rebuild the enclosure several times because he climbs the fence. They put him in a fully enclosed exhibit and he managed to unlock a door. They put him in an indoor exhibit and he refused to eat until they put him back outside, where he instantly climbed the fence and escaped. Now he and his lady have a little enclosure with a super high fence and round the clock camera surveillance off the path of the zoo trail. You can still go see him. But you wouldn't know he was there unless someone pointed him out to you. As far as I know, he hasn't tried to escape recently. He just really didn't want to be on display. So he made life hell until he got what he wanted. Imprinted raptors will try to mate with your head if you're not careful. This is especially problematic when you're dealing with large birds, like eagles. Fortunately, the largest bird that's attempted this with me is a Mississippi kite. So I'm safe for now. Parrots will try this as well. I've got 3 parrots and my cockatoo is a bit of an ass sometimes. I stopped letting him hang out with me when I'm at my desk because he'll occasionally try to mount my mouse hand. I do not approve that. He tries to be suave about it sometimes too. Still prefer him directing his sexual frustrations elsewhere. The hippos at our zoo will shit on their tails and helicopter it all over people. That's what every hippo does. They are marking territory that way. Edit. Now my highest rated comment is about sheeting hippo. Well, thank you guys. I worked at a Petco for a while. Soccer moms. Monkeys. Definitely the monkeys. They are cunning, fast and incredibly strong for their size. And they would find any opportunity to mess with you. Ironically, we had an enormous tiger that had been part of a circus, and while it weighed a couple of 100 pounds and could have killed you with just a swat of its paw, really just wanted to be petted. It was more likely you would be crushed when it pushed its head against you for a good scruffing. I work with squirrel monkeys. And I go in there with a little bowl of live mealworms for training purposes. One day one particular monkey was being fairly grabby, reaching for my hair and whatnot. I had closed up their cage and was getting ready to leave when I noticed I hadn't slid a hatch shut. I moved closer to the fence to do it, and someone, I don't know who, but I'm betting it was the grabby one, shot a hand out of the cage, reaching for the mealworms, and knocked the bowl out of my hands. I don't know if you know this, but individual mealworms are hard to pick up off the floor, especially when they're crawling away as fast as their little legs can go. And so then of course all the monkeys are on the ground reaching through the fence to grab the worms while I'm trying to scoop them back into the bowl as fast as I can. That must have been the greatest thing ever. Like holy shit, free worms everywhere. I did also have a capuchin monkey throw food at me. I ignored it because I was observing a different monkey at the time. And out of the corner of my eye I saw the one that I assumed threw the food come up to the fence and stick her arm under the door to try to reclaim the food she'd thrown at me. But it was out of her reach. Karma. I used to work in a cafe at a zoo. The wolves escaped twice whilst I was there. Once during the night. Another whilst the zoo was full of visitors. Keepers got them back in. Another zoo nearby had a mass breakout of their timber wolves. All got shot as they got too close to residential areas. Beware of the wolves. I volunteered at a zoo inside an amusement park once. Their featured exhibit were 2 brown bears rescued as cubs from a man's basement. One of the bears wasn't an asshole per se. He just never wanted to exit into the enclosure, disappointing a lot of the guests. He always stayed in the den, interacting mainly with the keeper and the other bear during nights and feedings. Huge sweetheart of a bear. He let me feed him peanuts from my hand and gave me a high five. Humans. I don't work in a zoo, but I have been working in reptiles farms over the years. My jobs have various snake species that are large and bitty, but nothing venomous. While snakes' hooks are always around, they are rarely used because after a while you just get used to being bitten and learn how to work with the animal and read its body language. The exception to this was a single female Florida king snake. She was permanently angry. It didn't matter if she had been fed, if she was breeding, if you were giving her water, or if you just walked past her cage. She was in a constant state of aggression. We did leave a snake hook by her cage because as soon as it was opened she would immediately start striking and hissing. After 2 or 3 strikes she would start getting even more angry and would start getting excessively posed, to the point where she would lean so far back she was practically upside down before striking. As soon as you closed the cage and walked away you could hear the thuds of her still striking and hitting the front. I've worked in various wildlife rehab research facilities, including a bird sanctuary where we did mist netting, setting up very fine nets between trees to catch songbirds, and banding of wild birds for research population counts. Handled everything from thrushes to woodpeckers to crows to sparrows, and the biggest jerks, ducking chickadees. Most of the birds were scared or curious when we took them out of the nets. The chickadees were ducking pissed. There was something bizarrely respectable about it. Here I am holding a bird smaller than the palm of my hand whose head I could crush with my ducking thumb. And it's going. You may be bigger than me, but if you don't let me go I will rip your ducking cuticle off. On an aside, the woman who owned and ran one of the wildlife rehabs where I worked had rescued and cared for wolves, bears, lynx, mountain lions. The one animal that put her in the ducking hospital, a white-tailed deer, gored the shit out of her. Same facility. Our female black bear loved rainy days. She'd wait until a school or tour group got up nice and close to her enclosure, then give the wet ground an almighty whack with her front paw. Sprayed the entire group with mud. She did it every damn time. Not a zookeeper, but this was told by my former co-worker who now works in a well-known zoo. She tells me that every morning they do a facilities check and animal head count at least and 1-2 hours before the zoo opens. It is not uncommon for a few escape artists to get away from their enclosures, mostly snakes and reptiles that are easily counted for after a quick sweep. For my co-worker who does not scare easily, what bothers her the most was this one big cat. Can't remember if it was a cheetah or lioness. Either way, it was a female big cat that stalked her every morning from the cages and glass enclosure. She first thought that the cat didn't like her because she was the new hire, but after months and almost a year, this big cat clearly wanted her for lunch. Told me she had a few near misses with said big cat. We have lions and the females are always jerks to the male lion. We had to separate them multiple times because they would beat the shit out of him. To be fair, he is a pussy, no pun intended, like the girls roar all the time, and he tried once and puked instead. Once he had a seizure and they ran over to just beat. Not claw or bite, but just whop the shit out of him with their paws. Now the females are growing manes because they are so dominant. Assholes literally took his manhood. Cassowary. If anyone need to enter their enclosure, there had to be 2 others in riot gear. Nothing makes you shit yourself more than scrambling behind them and hear the karate kick off the god smashing a shield behind you. I work with chimpanzees and I'll tell you, when the girls are in stress, think of kind of being in heat for dogs. They are just downright mean to the males of their troops, sometimes even going as far as taking prized food items right out of the mouths of some of the lower ranking males. I've also seen fights between chimpanzees, which is completely normal as aggression is central to their social hierarchies, where the fight had finally died down and everyone was making up with one another as they usually do until one of the females who wasn't done arguing handed one of the males a rock to throw at another female whom she was still mad at. This of course led to the fight starting all over again. Used to work at zoo in the education department. During my first few weeks I had to get trained on handling a bunch of different animals. One of those animals was a ferret. During my practical test the ferret started to sniff my wrist and I started to think that he might bite me. Stupid ferret bite me twice. Even once is considered a fail because biting means they are stressed. I was very pissed at that ferret. The trainer laughed at me and said I still passed. She had intentionally given me the asshole ferret who was known to bite people. I still hate that stupid ferret.